Hello, this is Coach Wilson, and this is Chapter 2, Section 2. Today we're going to be continuing our look at government in the United States and the first government. Now, in 1776, July 4th, 1776, that is, we began working on a Declaration of Independence. I'm sure before it was actually signed officially those days, they were working on it long before that. But some of the things that they tried to base this document on when building up, how are we going to set up a government? We just came out of the French and Indian War. England's been pretty hard on us as a colony. We've got to try to set up our own government. We're already at war at Lexington and Concord. Okay. So what they start doing is bringing in all of their ideas and trying to put them together. And one of the things that they come up with is the social contract. And a lot of this social contract stuff comes from John Locke's Second Treatise of Government, as well as other documents and things from the Enlightenment. But it basically said that people have contracts with the government. They give up some rights for government's protection and services. So essentially what that means is that you can't just do anything you want, but you give up a few of those rights so that the government will protect you. However, the government doesn't get all of your rights, and that's an important difference between the two. John Locke specifically said that people have natural rights, such as life, liberty, and property. Okay, and you've probably heard life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, same kind of thing. Basically, that you can live a life and, have a family, have a job, go out with your family, with your liberty, and if you want to go run the park or play basketball or whatever, and then you can own property, and the government cannot take that property away from you. Okay? Now, Thomas Jefferson is responsible for writing the Declaration of Independence. Okay? And they also believe that the source of government power was from an agreement with the people. Okay? So in the document that Thomas Jefferson helped wrote, and I believe 55 delegates signed, they believe that in order for a government to be very powerful, it had to have the support from the people it's governing. And it's just like anything else. If you're coaching a basketball team like I do here at the high school, and you can get buy-in from the team where they're buying into the rules and things of the team, and they do them on their own and enforce them kind of on their own, but then I step in when I need to, that works so much better than me having to always try to get them on board with what we're doing. Now, the Articles of Confederation was one of the first governing documents for our government. We didn't necessarily have a constitution. We just declared independence from England to set up a new government. So, 1776, we declared independence. Around 1781, we create our first government. All right, we needed something to help us form treaties and start kind of progressing towards being a country, especially if we were able to win the Revolutionary War. So in 1781, America's first government was formed under the Articles of Confederation, gave most of the power to the states, and the national government stayed very weak. And a lot of the reason that the national government stayed very weak was because they were afraid of the government becoming more powerful like it was in England. And for the colonists, they did not want to repeat and just create little England. They wanted to create a better nation, one that was free of oppression. Eventually, the Articles of Confederation will be replaced by the Constitution, namely because, unfortunately, there was too much power given to the states that were in the Articles of Confederation. So these former colonies have now become states, and these states, in order to pass any law between all 13, they had to have 9 out of 13 vote yes, which also meant in order to pass a new constitution, same way. And then I believe it was for any amendments, it had to be all 13 states. Okay, so some of the, here we go, getting ahead of myself. Some of the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. They needed a unanimous vote to change any of the articles, and they needed 9 out of 13 states' approval just to pass the laws. The national government lacked power to collect taxes, which meant it made it hard to pay anybody to have a military and to have an actual country's military that they defend the country. No executive branch, meaning there was no president to enforce the laws, no leader whatsoever that is kind of the figurehead. And then there's also no judicial branch to interpret the law. So looking at our government, we have a 3-branch government. Under the Articles of Confederation, they had one. They had one branch. They passed the laws, and pretty much what they say goes. The national government also could not regulate foreign interstate trade. So essentially, the government's not getting any money from goods that are being traded. They're not collecting any taxes. There's no banking system. There's no way to balance the trade between states and trying to make sure that things are fair and there's not some illegal practices going on. And so because of the articles and because they were so weak, bad things in the country began to happen. And one of those was Shays' Rebellion. Farmer Daniel Shay led a group of farmers angry about taxes, and the taxes had gone up so high on their farms. Many of them were losing their farms. They couldn't afford it. And there was no national government basically to put down the rebellion, which forced George Washington and the militia who had been fighting in the Revolutionary War once the war was over to quell this rebellion. However, the important thing here about Shays' Rebellion is that it made people realize that the articles had to be changed. We have to have someone who is in charge, who makes decisions, who is going to step in and take care of business when we need it to be done. Now, the American Revolution lasted from 1775 to 1783. The Continental Army, or the Americans, lost a lot of early battles, specifically when we're talking about in Boston, at the Battle of Bunker Hill, and you have a large amount of British troops coming in and not a ton of supplies on the colonist side. The one bright spot for the colonists is that the British didn't really care. A lot of the British soldiers didn't care to be in the war. However, it was a long war, okay? Couple of just key battles here, and we're not going to spend much time on this. The Battle of Trenton, which was a surprise attack by George Washington, where he crossed the Delaware and snuck up behind the Hessian soldiers. The Battle of Saratoga, which was by far one of the biggest victories for the colonists because it was seen as kind of a turning point in the war. It was a huge battle. If the British had been able to win the Battle of Saratoga, it would have really cut off a lot of supply lines and various things for the colonists. But because they were able to fend them off, it kind of split the British army instead. And it also convinced France to join the war. So France had been pledging all this potential help at some point. But now, as a result, France has pledged to help the colonies fight for victory. Okay, and eventually, British General Cornwallis is going to surrender at the Battle of Yorktown. And a year or so after that, we're going to get the Treaty of Paris. Okay, it meant independence from England. The western boundary of what is going to become the United States is set at the Mississippi River, and its northern boundary would be the Great Lakes, kind of Canada there. Okay, guys, that's all I have for you today. Make sure you're keeping up with your Chapter 2 vocabulary, and make sure you're keeping up with all of your notes and your bell ringers, and let me know if you're having any kind of problems. If not, I'll talk to you soon.